The dashboard clock read late afternoon when Officer Harlan Voss spotted Cale Rivers walking alone, just another black teenager in a white neighborhood, suspicious by default in the officer's eyes. The stop that followed was textbook harassment. But it was Voss's mocking laugh when Cale mentioned his father's career in special forces that proved to be his first and most catastrophic mistake. What that suspended former soldier failed to recognize was the disciplined dignity in the boy's eyes, an image mirrored from the man who had taught him to face injustice with quiet strength. Days later, when security cameras caught black SUVs circulating through the neighborhood, and Voss began searching classified files that returned only redacted warnings, the real game had already begun. Elias Rivers was coming home, and Oak Ridge Heights would never be the same. Before we continue, I would love to know where you are watching from today. And if you are enjoying these stories, make sure you are subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you will not want to miss. Afternoon sunlight fell across Cale Rivers' shoulders as he walked the familiar path home from school. His headphones pumped music straight into his ears, creating a bubble that separated him from the world around him. At 16, Cale had perfected the art of moving through his neighborhood like a present but invisible shadow, or at least that was what he preferred. But in Oak Ridge Heights, a predominantly white suburban neighborhood where the Rivers family had lived for a decade, going unnoticed was not always possible, especially not for Cale. As he passed Mrs. Callahan's house, the curtains shifted. They always did. The elderly woman never failed to track his movements from her immaculate garden. Cale kept his eyes forward, pretending not to notice, just as his father had taught him. "Keep your head high, but your guard higher," Elias Rivers had once told him. "Some people will always see you before they see who you really are." The corner store came next. Inside, Mr. Hale's eyes locked on Cale through the window. His gaze was suspicious, steady, as always. Cale had been in that store hundreds of times buying snacks or drinks after basketball practice, and still the owner watched him as if he might steal something at any moment. Cale turned up the volume on his music. It was easier that way. I was halfway home when the patrol car approached slowly beside him. He felt it before he saw it. That characteristic way a vehicle matched his pace. His stomach tightened. He had seen this before, though usually it happened to older boys, not a sophomore walking home on an ordinary afternoon. The window lowered, revealing the serious face of Officer Voss. Cale did not know his name yet, but he soon would. "Hey you, hold up a second," the officer said. Cale stopped and removed his headphones. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "If they stop you, be polite, stay calm, don't give them a reason." "Yes, sir," Cale answered with a steady voice despite the anxiety twisting in his throat. Officer Harlan Voss was new to the Heights Police Department. At 32, he moved with the aggressive confidence of someone who needed to prove something. His haircut and rigid posture betrayed his military past, though few knew he had been expelled from training before seeing any real action, a detail he conveniently omitted from most conversations. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Voss asked, narrowing his eyes as he scanned Cale from head to toe. "I live here, sir, just coming home from school." "Identification." "I don't have a driver's license yet. I'm 16, only my school ID." Cale slowly reached toward his backpack. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Voss growled, his hand instinctively moving toward his holster. Cale froze, hands visible in front of him. "My school ID is in my backpack, sir." Voss stepped out of the vehicle and circled around to where Cale stood on the sidewalk. Some neighbors slowed their cars to watch. Others peered from windows, drawn by the spectacle of the new officer questioning the black teenager. "What's in the backpack? Empty it." "Just books and school stuff," Cale answered carefully, setting his backpack on the ground and opening it. As Cale pulled out his books and notebooks, Voss's attitude shifted from cautious to contemptuous. The backpack contained only school materials, a water bottle, and basketball shoes. No weapons, no drugs, nothing that justified the stop. But instead of ending the encounter, Voss pressed on. "Where exactly do you live?" he demanded. "Cedar Street, sir, number 1742, just 3 blocks farther." "Your parents home?" "My mom gets home soon from work." "And your dad, where is he?" Voss's tone changed, becoming almost conversational, yet laced with a mocking edge that made Cale's skin prickle. "He's away for work." "What kind of work keeps a man away from his family?" Voss said, leaning in a little. "It's always the same with you people, isn't it? Never a man in the house. The implication was clear, and it stung. Cale felt heat rise to his face, but he kept his expression neutral, just as his father had taught him. "My dad is in special forces," Cale said quietly. The words came without swagger, without challenge, only the clearly spoken truth. Voss's face lit up in a wide smile before he let out a laugh that echoed down the quiet street. "Special forces," he repeated loudly enough for the growing crowd of onlookers to hear. "Your daddy's some kind of Rambo, huh? That's funny, kid." Cale said nothing. His face was a mask that revealed none of the anger and humiliation boiling inside him. "Hey, Quinn," Voss called to the other officer who had just arrived in a second patrol car. "This kid says his dad's in special forces. Maybe he works with Chuck Norris." Officer Quinn let out an uncomfortable laugh, glancing sideways at the witnesses who continued to gather without either officer noticing. A girl Cale's age partially hid behind a tree across the street. Sienna Hale, one of Cale's classmates, had her phone recording everything. Her finger hesitated several times over the stop button, but something told her she should keep filming. "Listen, Mini-Me," Voss said, stepping closer. "Next time you invent stories, at least pick something believable. I was in the army. I know what real soldiers look like." Cale remained silent, his eyes steady but not defiant. He knew better than to talk back to a police officer, especially one who clearly wanted to provoke him. "Take your things and be on your way," Voss finally said, bored by the lack of reaction. "And stay out of trouble." Cale carefully put his things away, feeling the weight of the stares on him. He put his headphones back on, though he did not turn the music on. As he walked away, he could still hear Voss's voice. "Special forces, please," the officer muttered to Quinn. "I bet his dad's in the special forces of the couch. Probably doesn't even know him." Cale kept walking, his steps measured and calm despite the storm inside him. He did not look back. He did not give them the satisfaction of seeing how much those words had hurt. Voss returned to his patrol car but paused thoughtfully. "Hey, Quinn, you know anything about some special forces guy living around here?" Quinn shrugged. "Never heard of any, King. Makes me curious now. Find out who his dad really is." "Yeah, sure," Quinn answered, though his tone suggested he had no intention of doing anything with that insignificant request. But Voss was not ready to let it go. Something about the boy's calm had gotten under his skin. Cale had neither cowered nor shown fear, and that bothered him more than he was willing to admit. As Cale rounded the corner, Sienna Hale slipped her phone into her pocket and walked in the opposite direction, the video safely stored. She still did not know what she would do with it, but she sensed it would be important. Voss watched the street for a few more seconds and then climbed back into the patrol car. He had a new mission now: discover the truth about Elias Rivers. The door of the modest two-story house at 1742 Cedar Street closed softly behind Cale as he entered his home. Unlike many of the more elaborate houses in Oak Ridge Heights, the Rivers residence was humble but well cared for, a reflection of Lila Rivers' careful attention, even while working full-time as a hospital administrator. Cale set his backpack by the door and stood for a moment in the foyer, letting the familiar feeling of home wrap around him. Furniture polished with a lemon scent, the soft trace of the jasmine candles his mother loved, the lingering aroma of the previous night's dinner. The living room walls were decorated with a careful selection of family photographs. Lila and Cale at his middle school graduation, Cale as a child in the garden, the three of them, mother, father, son, on the beach years earlier, squinting into the sun. But there was no photograph of Elias in uniform. Nothing that suggested his military career. That was intentional. Cale went to the kitchen and took an apple from the fruit bowl. The encounter with Officer Voss returned to his mind as he took a bite. The crunch filled the silence of the house. A memory surfaced. Cale, at 8 years old, sitting cross-legged in the backyard while his father taught him special knots. "Why do I have to learn this, Dad?" he had asked. "We almost never go camping." Elias's smile had been warm but serious. "These are skills, son. Some skills you show the world, like your basketball. Others you keep until the moment comes to use them. Being invisible when necessary is sometimes the greatest advantage." At the time, Cale had not fully understood what his father meant. Now, at 16, the pieces were beginning to fit together. The sound of keys in the front door pulled him from his thoughts. Lila Rivers entered. Her nurse's uniform had been replaced by the formal clothes she wore as a hospital administrator. Despite the long day, her posture remained upright, her movements precise. "Hi, sweetheart," she greeted him, setting down her bag. "How was school?" "Fine," Cale answered automatically. Lila gave him a look that said she did not believe him, but she would not press. Not yet. She had a sixth sense with her son. "Homework?" "Just some calculus and a history paper." She nodded and then paused, studying his face. "Something happened today." It was not a question. Cale considered downplaying it, but he knew it was useless. His mother always saw everything. "A police officer stopped me on the way home." Lila tensed. Her relaxed demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by alert concern. "What happened? What did he want?" "Nothing. The usual. Asked what I was doing around here. Checked my backpack." "Did he give you any reason for stopping you?" "No." Lila's jaw tightened. "Did you get his name or badge number?" "Voss, I think. He's new." She nodded, filing the information away mentally. "What else? I know there's more." Cale hesitated. "He asked about Dad." The change in Lila was subtle but immediate. A slight narrowing of the eyes, an almost imperceptible straightening of her already perfect posture. "What did you tell him?" "Just that he's in special forces, nothing more." Lila was silent for a long moment. "Cale, we've talked about this. You know you're not supposed to—" "I know, Mom," he interrupted. "But he was saying things about how boys like me never have dads at home. I didn't give details. I just couldn't let him think Dad abandoned us." Lila's expression softened. She crossed the kitchen and hugged her son. She knew he accepted that gesture less and less as he grew older, but that night he did not pull away. "Listen to me carefully," she said in a low, serious voice. "Your father's work is not something you discuss with strangers, and especially not with the police. It's not just about privacy. It's about safety, our safety, your father's safety." "I know," Cale said. "I'm sorry." "It's all right. Just be careful. That Officer Voss, if he asks again, just say your father works in government consulting. Nothing more." Cale nodded, though he wondered why it was necessary to hide behind a boring story if his father's work was legitimate. Later that night, while working on his history assignment, his phone vibrated with a text from Sienna Hale. They were not close friends, more acquaintances who shared a few classes, but her message was direct. "I need to talk to you tomorrow about what happened after school." Cale looked at the message, wondering how Sienna knew about his encounter with Voss. He replied with a simple, "Okay," and set the phone aside. A subtle discomfort settled in his chest like a fog. The next morning at school, Sienna found him before first period and pulled him aside near the music room where few students passed. "I saw what happened yesterday," she said bluntly, "with the cop." Cale's face remained neutral. "Yeah, it was crazy the way he talked to you." She hesitated, then added, "I recorded part of it." Cale's eyes widened slightly, the only sign of his surprise. "Why would you do that?" "Because it wasn't right," Sienna said, pushing her glasses up. "My dad is a civil rights lawyer. He always says, document everything." Cale nodded slowly, processing that information. "What are you going to do with it?" "Nothing, unless you want me to." But then she asked, "Was it true, about your dad?" The question hung between them. Cale considered dodging it, denying it, changing the subject. Instead, he simply said, "Yes." Sienna studied him for a moment and then nodded. "Cool, just wanted to know." The conversation ended when the warning bell rang. But as Cale walked toward his first class, Sienna's question stayed in his mind. Was it true about his father? Yes, but even Cale did not know the full extent of what that meant. The news spread quickly through the high school. By lunchtime, everyone somehow knew about Cale's confrontation with Officer Voss. While he ate alone at his usual table, Tyrell Brooks and his friends approached. "Hey, Rivers!" Tyrell called loudly enough for several tables to hear. "I heard you told Voss your dad is like Rambo or something." Cale continued eating his sandwich without looking up. "My dad says your dad works at Burger Force, not Special Forces," Tyrell continued, encouraged by his friend's laughter. "Your dad talks about my family at dinner or what? Weird." Cale finally raised his gaze. His dark eyes met Tyrell's. He said nothing, but something in that steady look made Tyrell shift uncomfortably. "Come on, guys," Tyrell muttered, walking away with his friends. Sienna sat down across from Cale a moment later. "Ignore them," she said. Tyrell's dad is that real estate agent who got caught posting racist stuff online last year. Cale's mouth curved slightly in what might have been a smile. You know a lot about everyone's dads. Sienna shrugged. My mom works at the courthouse. I hear things. They ate in silence for a while until Sienna spoke again. Special forces. That's intense. I don't want to talk about it, Cale said quietly. Sienna nodded. Okay. But if that cop keeps bothering you, tell me. Like I said, my dad is a lawyer. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Voss began his shift with a new mission. He had spent the previous night searching social media for information on the Rivers family, but found little. Lila Rivers had a basic Facebook profile with minimal posts and no photos of her husband. Cale did not appear to have any social media presence, unusual for a teenager. Voss began his patrol through the Cedar Street area, driving slowly past the Rivers house. It looked quiet, ordinary. Nothing that suggested a Special Forces member lived there. He parked a few houses down and approached an older woman working in her garden. "Good morning, ma'am," he said with his most charming smile. "Officer Voss, just checking on the neighborhood. How long have you lived here?" "Almost 30 years, she answered with pride. "Then you must know your neighbors well. The Rivers family at 1742, what's their story?" The woman, Martha Ellison, straightened and wiped her hands. "Lila is a sweetheart. Works at the hospital. The boy Cale is quiet but polite. Always offers to shovel my snow in winter." "And Mr. Rivers?" Martha's expression turned thoughtful. "He travels a lot. I think he's military, though Lila doesn't talk much about it. They're a very private family." "Military, huh? Do you know which branch or what he does?" Martha shook her head. "Like I said, they're private. Elias comes and goes. Sometimes he's home for months, then disappears for the same amount of time. Good man, though. Fixed my porch steps last spring." Voss nodded, filing the information away. "Thank you for your time, ma'am. Just trying to get to know the community." For the rest of the day, the pattern repeated. Neighbors knew the Rivers family but knew little about Elias. He was rarely seen, always working, but no one knew exactly at what. That night, Voss sat in his patrol car parked across from the Rivers house. He watched from a distance. The lights were on. Through what appeared to be the kitchen window, he could see Lila moving and occasionally Cale passing by. No sign of a third member of the household. Voss's radio crackled. "Unit 4, what's your 20? "Cedar Street," he answered. "Finishing patrol." "Copy. Shift almost over. Head in for report." Voss started the engine but gave the Rivers house one last look before driving away. What the boy had said still bothered him. Special Forces. It seemed implausible, yet no one in the neighborhood could confirm or deny it. That mystery only fed his curiosity. Later that night, Lila Rivers's phone rang shortly after midnight. She reached for it in the dark. The caller ID showed an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Silence. No breathing, no background noise, only emptiness. "Hello?" she repeated more firmly. The line went dead. Lila sat up in bed, fully awake. This was the third such call that week. She checked that her bedroom door was locked, then reached for her secure phone, a separate device hidden in her nightstand. She sent a message to a number saved only as Y. Another call, same pattern. The reply came seconds later. "Noted, Protocol S." Lila deleted both messages, hid the phone again, and tried to sleep. But her mind raced restlessly. 16 years of living carefully, of protecting her family's secrets. And now this new officer asking questions. It was no coincidence. The next day, Officer Voss sat at his desk in the station, coffee in hand, reviewing databases. He had found basic information on Lila Rivers, employment history, driver's license, property taxes, everything normal. Cale's school record showed he was a good student with no disciplinary issues, but Elias Rivers proved more elusive. Voss had basic confirmation that Elias existed. Marriage certificate, shared property with Lila, listed as father on Cale's birth certificate. But his employment history was vague, and when he tried to access Elias's military file, he hit an unexpected obstacle. Classified authorization required. "What the hell?" Voss muttered, staring at the screen. "Problem?" asked Sergeant Graves as he passed the desk. Voss quickly switched screens. "No, sir, just looking into something." When Graves walked away, Voss returned to the database. A classified information classification could mean many things. Elias could be a military contractor, an intelligence analyst, or hold any role requiring a security clearance. But that did not necessarily confirm he belonged to Special Forces. Still, it was enough to unsettle Voss. He had told his colleagues the story of the cocky kid with his fairy tale about Special Forces, convinced he could easily debunk it. Now he was no longer so sure. That night, Voss returned to Cedar Street in his personal vehicle, a black Dodge Charger with tinted windows. He parked a block from the Rivers house and settled in to watch. It was well past 11 when the house lights finally went out. Voss waited another hour before slipping quietly out of the car and heading toward the property. He stayed in the shadows, moving with the confidence of someone who believed himself invisible. His plan was simple. Get close, maybe look through the windows, see if there was any sign of Elias Rivers' presence or absence. What Voss did not know was that he was being watched. 3 houses down, in a darkened room, a figure tracked him through specialized optics. When the officer slipped along the side of the Rivers house, the figure raised a secure phone and spoke quietly. "Midnight. We have activity at the Rivers residence. Local police, civilian clothes, unauthorized surveillance. Identity confirmed. Officer Harlan Voss." A pause. Then, "Understood. Continue monitoring only." The figure returned to the window, watching as Voss circled the house, peered through windows, tested the back door. Finally, the officer retreated and drove away. Only then did the figure send a final message. "They are probing the Rivers residence. Recommend escalating protocol." The reply was immediate and brief. "Received. Informing Ghost." Voss drove home satisfied with his reconnaissance, though he had learned little. He had no idea that his actions had triggered a response far beyond the quiet neighborhood of Oak Ridge Heights. No idea that the name Elias Rivers was being mentioned in secure facilities few had access to. No idea that he had just stepped into shadows far larger than he could imagine. Dawn arrived in Oak Ridge Heights with a silence that concealed the growing tension in the neighborhood. Officer Harlan Voss sat in his patrol car parked a block from the Rivers house. He had been there since early morning, short on sleep and fueled by a mixture of coffee and obsession. The house remained calm, curtains closed, no movement, no signs of life. Voss checked his watch. Officially, he had been off duty for an hour. What he planned was not part of police procedure. It crossed lines. But he could not shake the persistent feeling that what Cale Rivers had said about his father was more than simple adolescent bravado. He waited until Lila's car left the garage. She wore medical scrubs that day, early shift at the hospital. 20 minutes later, Cale emerged with his backpack over his shoulder, headphones on. Voss sank lower in the seat as the boy walked past toward school. The house was empty now. Perfect. Voss circled around the back, moving between the neighbors' tree lines to avoid being seen. The backyard was modest but well maintained. A small wooden shed stood near the rear fence. Voss tested the door, locked. He looked around, pulled a tool from his pocket. The lock was basic. It took him only seconds to force it. The door opened with a soft creak. Inside the shed, everything was orderly. Garden tools hung on the wall, a lawnmower in the corner, shelves with household items. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of the ordinary. Voss felt a mild disappointment. Then he saw something behind a stack of terracotta pots on the highest shelf, the corner of a box. He stood on tiptoe and carefully brought it down. The metal box was old, dented, secured with a small padlock. Voss examined it. Breaking a second lock would be hard to explain if he were caught. Instead, he pulled out his phone and photographed the box from several angles. Then he tried to return it to its hiding place. As he stretched, the box slipped slightly in his hands and the lid shifted. It was not locked after all. The padlock was there but not secured. Voss hesitated only a moment before opening it. Inside were a few items: foreign currency, a small notebook filled with what looked like code or shorthand, and beneath them a photograph. It showed a young Elias in desert camouflage uniform standing with 3 other men whose faces were partially in shadow. Elias's face was also half covered, but his eyes were clear, penetrating, looking directly at the camera with an intensity that unsettled Voss. There were no visible insignia, no indication of where or when it had been taken. Voss photographed everything quickly and returned each object exactly as he had found it. He replaced the box, left the shed, and made sure it was closed. Back in his car, he reviewed the photos, enlarging Elias's face. There was something in those eyes that bothered him. A hardness. A gaze that seemed to pierce the camera as if it knew someone would see it years later. "Who the hell are you really, Elias?" he murmured. That same morning, Lila Rivers stormed into the police station. Her hospital badge still hung from her neck. Her usual controlled demeanor had been replaced by barely contained fury. "I want to file a complaint," she said in a firm, controlled voice. Officer Jenkins looked up. "What's the problem, ma'am?" "Someone broke into my shed this morning. I have a security camera that caught it." She placed her phone on the counter, showing a clear image of Voss forcing the lock. "And that someone is one of your officers." Jenkins' eyes widened as he recognized Voss on the screen. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to call the sergeant." "I know exactly who it is," Lila continued. "Officer Harlan Voss, the same one who has been harassing my son and asking invasive questions about my family around the neighborhood." Sergeant Graves came out of his office, alerted by the disturbance. "What's going on here?" Lila repeated her complaint and showed him the video. Graves's face hardened. "Mrs. Rivers, I want to assure you we will take this very seriously. Please come with me to my office so we can take your formal statement." An hour later, Lila left with a copy of her complaint and a case number. Graves promised a full investigation, but Lila did not miss the change in his expression when she mentioned Elias's name. There was something in his eyes, recognition, caution. That afternoon, while she recounted the events to KL, her phone vibrated with a text message. She checked it and frowned. "What's wrong?" KL asked. "Nothing," she answered too quickly. "Just work." But it was not work. The message simply said, "Complaint registered, flagged, remain alert." No signature, no explanations. None were needed. Lila deleted it immediately. Meanwhile, across town, Sienna Hale sat in front of her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. What had begun as simple curiosity about Kael's father had turned into a deep dive into military forums and declassified reports. She had always been good with computers, better than adults believed. She navigated archived reports, public military records, and specialized forums where veterans shared sanitized versions of their experiences. It had taken her days, but she finally found something. A passing mention in a redacted report. Extraction team led by Rivers successfully recovered the target despite heavy opposition. And later, on a retired Marines forum, when they sent the silencers, we knew it was serious. Those guys were ghosts, in and out before anyone knew they were there. Another comment mentioned Operation Silencer as one of the most classified units in recent history, with much of its work still secret decades later. Sienna leaned back in her chair, processing. She could not be 100% certain it was Kael's father. Rivers was a common last name, but the timeline matched, and the level of secrecy would explain the family's privacy. Her bedroom door opened. Her father poked his head in. "Still awake, Sienna? It's midnight." "Just finishing some research," she answered quickly, closing the browser tabs. James Hale studied his daughter's face. "Does this have to do with the Rivers kid and that officer you mentioned?" Sienna hesitated. "Maybe." James sighed. "Sienna, I know you want to help, but be careful. If what you suspect about the father is true, it's not ground you want to walk without a life jacket." "What does that mean?" "Just be careful. If Lila Rivers needs legal help, tell her to call me directly. But beyond that, stay away." After her father left, Sienna reopened the browser. There was one more reference, a highly redacted mission report with a partially visible signature. E. Rivers, Unit Operation Silencer 8. It was not conclusive proof, but for Sienna it was enough to believe Kael had told the truth. The following days brought a strange calm to Oak Ridge Heights. Voss had been temporarily reassigned to desk duty pending the investigation. Kael walked to school without incident, but there were subtle changes. Black SUVs with tinted windows were seen circulating the area at night. Distinctive vehicles appeared parked at odd hours. Neighbors began to murmur. Something was happening in that quiet suburb. One afternoon, stopping at Thompson's Corner for a Gatorade after basketball practice, Kael came face to face with Voss. The officer was in civilian clothes buying cigarettes at the counter. Their eyes met in the store's mirror. Voss turned slowly, a smile stretching across his face that did not reach his eyes. Well, look who's here. Junior Rambo, he said loudly enough for the other customers to hear. Still telling fairy tales, soldier boy? Cale said nothing. He held the man's gaze while placing his drink on the counter and taking out his wallet. Voss moved closer. You know what's funny? I've been looking into your dad. Interesting stuff. Cale kept his face neutral even as his heart raced. He paid for his drink and turned to leave. I'm not finished with you, Voss said in a tight voice. But I'm finished listening, Cale answered quietly. The look was the same one he had learned from his father. Steady, unbreakable, revealing nothing, yet seeing everything. Something in that gaze unsettled Voss. It was too familiar, too much like the photograph. The same quiet certainty, the same unspoken strength. You think you're tough because Daddy taught you a few tricks? Voss stepped even closer, invading his personal space. Let me tell you something, kid. Men like him aren't heroes. They're just good at killing. Cale did not flinch. He did not step back. We're done here, sir. I need to get home. The lack of reaction only frustrated Voss further. He wanted to provoke him, to make him lose control. But Cale remained serene, his dignity intact despite the public humiliation. The store owner, Mr. Thompson, cleared his throat loudly. Everything all right over there? Everything's fine, Voss growled, finally stepping back. Just catching up with a troubled kid. Cale walked out of the store, feeling the officer's eyes locked on his back. Once outside, he took a deep breath, steadying himself. His father's words returned to his mind. Control what you can control. Your reactions are yours alone. The next day, Cale was playing basketball with his friends on the public court when several patrol cars pulled up with lights flashing. Officer Voss stepped out of the first one, followed by two other officers. Cale Rivers, Voss called, striding onto the court. You're coming with us. The game stopped. Everyone turned to look. Why? Cale asked, still holding the ball. There was a reported disturbance. Witnesses say you were involved. What disturbance? I've been here for the last hour. Voss approached, already holding handcuffs. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Cale's friends protested. He didn't do anything. We've been here the whole time. But Voss had no interest in their testimony. This was personal, a power play. He wanted to put Cale in his place to show who was in control. Turn around, hands behind your back, he ordered. Cale obeyed, knowing resistance would only make things worse. As he felt the cold metal close around his wrists, he remembered his father's words. In a room full of wolves, become the silent storm. From across the street, Sienna was recording everything on her phone. This time she was not only filming, she was streaming live to her private account where her father could watch. James Hale was already calling colleagues before the patrol car even carried Cale away. At the station, Cale sat alone in a waiting room. It was not technically an interrogation room. He had not yet been charged with anything, but the message was clear. Voss wanted him to sweat. Lila arrived like a controlled storm. Where is my son? She demanded at the front desk. Cale Rivers, the officer answered. An officer brought him in from the basketball court about an hour ago. And why is he being held? He's being detained for an investigation into a disturbance. What disturbance? My son was playing basketball with his friends. I have multiple witnesses. Ma'am, you'll need to speak with the officer who arrested him. Then find him now, and I want to see my son immediately. That's not possible at this moment. Officer Voss is processing him. Officer Voss. Lila's voice turned sharp. The same one being investigated for breaking into my property? The same one who has been harassing my son? He's in charge of the case? The officer looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, I understand your concern. No, you don't understand. Call your supervisor now, or the next call is to my lawyer and then to every media outlet in the state. While Lila demanded to see her son, Voss entered the room where Cale waited. Comfortable? He asked with a mocking smile. Cale did not answer. You know I could charge you with assault? I have a witness who says you pushed someone on the court. Your word against his. Still Cale remained silent. Not so brave without Daddy to protect you, huh? Voss leaned in. Where is he? On some secret mission? Or does he just not care enough to show up? Cale looked him directly in the eyes. Are you charging me with something, sir? Content continues in the same measured, emotionally rich style, preserving every event, conversation, and turning point while removing specific time markers and adjusting names for an American audience. Elias climbed the stairs in silence. He stopped in front of Cale's door. He listened to his son's steady breathing for a moment before carefully opening it. Cale slept with one arm across his face. Elias stood watching him once more, surprised by how quickly children grow. His work had kept him away too often. He had left many gaps in his son's life. And still Cale had become a young man any father would be proud of. Dignified, controlled, principled. As if sensing his presence, Cale stirred, opened his eyes slowly, stared at the figure in the doorway for an instant, then sat up abruptly. "Dad? Hey, son." Elias entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Sorry for waking you." In the soft light from the hallway, Cale studied his father's face. There were new lines around his eyes, a fresh scar near his temple, but his presence was the same, solid, reliable, powerful in its silence. "You weren't supposed to be back for another month. Plans changed." Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. "I heard you had some trouble." Cale lowered his gaze, a shadow of shame crossing his face. "I shouldn't have told that cop you were in Special Forces. Mom always said—" "You did nothing wrong," Elias interrupted firmly. "That officer came after you for who you are, not for what you said." Cale nodded slowly, processing his father's words. "He wouldn't stop. He kept asking about you." "I know, and now he faces the consequences of his actions. Are you in trouble for coming back early?" Elias smiled slightly. "Nothing I can't handle." They talked for nearly an hour, father and son reconnecting after months apart. Elias spoke of patience, of legacy, of the discipline required to face injustice without becoming part of it, not as a lecture, but as a legacy passed from one generation to the next. "The hardest battles," he said, "are fought with restraint, not rage. Remember that." Finally, Cale drifted back to sleep. Before leaving, Elias asked quietly, "This Officer Voss, tell me everything." The next morning, while Cale was at school, Elias left before dawn. He drove to the outskirts of town to an old restaurant that had been there since he was a boy. Inside, 3 elderly black men sat at a corner table drinking coffee and playing dominoes. They looked up as he entered, recognition and respect in their eyes. "Well, look what the wind blew in," said Walter Ellison, the oldest of the 3 at 82. Elias Rivers, back among the living. Elias smiled, shook each man's hand firmly, and sat with them. Those men had known him since childhood. They had watched him grow up, leave to serve, and return changed. They were respected elders of the community, with influence deeper than many realized. "Just passing through," Elias said, accepting the cup the waitress brought without him having to order. "We heard your boy had trouble with that new officer," remarked James Brooks, a retired mailman who knew everything that happened in the neighborhood. "Voss, that one brings bad news." Elias nodded. "Seems he's developed an unhealthy interest in my family." The third man, Reverend Caleb Ellison, studied him carefully. "You didn't come just to catch up, son. What do you need from us?" Elias had always respected the Reverend's directness. "Information. Eyes in the community. Voss has been suspended, but that won't stop him. I need to know if he makes any move." The 3 men exchanged glances, communicating silently with decades of trust. "You can count on it," Walter finally said. "We'll put the word out without making noise." "Thank you." Elias took a sip of his coffee. "And the rest of the town, how are things?" "Mixed," Reverend Ellison answered honestly. "Some people were outraged by what they did to your son. Others just shrugged." "There are things that don't change," Elias observed. "But some do," James interjected. "When you left 20 years ago, a black family couldn't even live in Oak Ridge Heights. Now your son walks those streets. It's not always easy, but it's possible." Elias nodded, acknowledging the truth of those words. "Progress is slow, but it comes." "Now tell us about that Special Forces business," the Reverend said with a smile. "We always knew you were into something serious, but you never shared details." Elias smiled too. "And I won't now, but I promise when all this is over we'll talk properly." Leaving the restaurant, Elias felt a familiar comfort. Reconnecting with the men who had shaped him restored a part of himself. He had left Oak Ridge Heights as a restless teenager, frustrated by its limitations and prejudices. He had returned from time to time, always in the shadows. Few knew that in reality he had never stopped watching over his hometown. Meanwhile, Officer Harlan Voss sat in his apartment surrounded by papers, notes, and empty coffee cups. The suspension had only fed his obsession. The fact that they had taken his badge and weapon in front of the Rivers family burned like acid inside him. But Voss believed he was close to something big. The partial file he had obtained showed that Elias Rivers was not simply a former soldier with an attitude. He was active, classified, connected to operations that did not even have official names. The kind of operative whose existence was denied through official channels. "Why here?" Voss muttered, staring at the sparse information. "Why live in a place like this if you're an elite agent?" The question had consumed him for days. His working theory: Elias Rivers was dirty. He was running some covert operation using his classified status as a shield. It was the only explanation that made sense to his suspicious mind. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Frank, it's Voss again. Did you look at what I sent you?" The local journalist sighed on the other end. "Harlan, we already talked about this. I can't publish a story accusing a citizen of being a secret agent without proof, and especially not now that you're suspended for harassing his family." "I'm telling you there's something here," Voss insisted. "This guy appears out of nowhere, flashes a classified credential, and suddenly the whole department is walking on eggshells. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you?" "What seems suspicious to me is your obsession with this family," Frank answered sharply. "Drop it before you lose more than just your badge." Voss hung up furious. No one believed him. No one saw what he saw. Fine. He would prove it himself. He took another phone, a prepaid one bought with cash, and dialed another number. The man who answered had no name. He was only a service. Voss had used him before to dig up secrets on suspects. "I need everything on Elias Rivers," he said bluntly. "Military records, financial transactions, travel history, whatever you can get." "It's going to cost you," the voice replied. "And if he's really government, it could get complicated." "Do it," Voss ordered, "and put together a file on his son too, Cale Rivers." After hanging up, Voss formulated a new plan. He would gather enough evidence to publicly expose Elias Rivers, force the truth into the open. And what better way than through the son? "Special Forces daddy," he murmured with a bitter smile. "Total fraud, and I'm going to prove it." Voss kicked his tire in frustration. The magnitude of his error was becoming clear. They were stranded, dressed in tactical gear, after illegally entering a residence. He knew it. Voss knew it. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He knew we were coming. While the group debated their options, Elias made a single call from his secure location. He did not call the police. That would have been expected. Instead, he contacted an old military friend who now worked at the Pentagon. "Speak, Rivers," the voice said simply. "I need to call in a favor." The next morning, while Voss and his accomplices faced the consequences of their failed raid, written reprimands, extended suspensions, possible criminal charges, Chief Rowan Hale received another call from Washington. This time the message was crystal clear. "The situation in Oak Ridge Heights has attracted attention at the highest level," the military contact warned. "Your problem is about to become very public. I suggest you deal with it before it buries your career." Elias's strategic response had been calculated for maximum effect with minimum force. He did not confront Voss directly, did not engage physically, did not even call local authorities. He simply documented everything and let the system act. But Voss, consumed by humiliation and desperate to salvage his credibility, made his most reckless move. The next day he appeared at Oak Ridge High during lunch. No badge, no authority, but still carrying the air of an officer. He approached Cale in the middle of a crowded cafeteria. "Cale Rivers, you're under arrest," he announced loudly, grabbing the teenager by the arm. Students gaped. Some stepped back. Teachers approached uncertainly. "On what charge?" Cale asked, remaining calm even as his heart raced. "Obstruction of justice and interference with a police investigation," Voss improvised. "Your father is being investigated for serious crimes and you've been withholding information." It was completely fabricated. But Voss had already crossed the threshold of reason. In his mind, this public arrest would force Elias out of the shadows. It would make him reveal his secrets. Sienna, sitting nearby, began streaming live immediately. "This is happening right now at Oak Ridge High," she narrated in a steady voice despite the shock. "A suspended officer is trying to arrest Cale Rivers without a warrant or just cause." The video spread instantly. From her networks, it reached local news sites within minutes. As Voss escorted the handcuffed Kyle out of the school, a crowd of outraged students and bewildered teachers followed. The principal tried to intervene. "Officer Voss, you have no authority here. Release the student immediately." "Stay out of this," Voss snapped. "This is police business." "You are not on duty," the principal answered. "I'm calling the department right now." But Voss had already pushed Kale into his personal vehicle. In his delusional state, he believed he was finally taking control of the situation, forcing a confrontation that would reveal the truth. In less than an hour, the Oak Ridge Heights police station was surrounded by protesters, students, parents, community members, all outraged by Sienna's video. Inside, Elias Rivers entered through the main door. His demeanor was calm, but his purpose was clear. Chief Hale met him in the lobby, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Rivers, I want to assure you this was not an authorized action. Voss acted completely outside our authority." "Where is my son?" Elias asked. His voice was low, but it carried an edge that made everyone straighten. "He's in the interview room with Voss. We've already sent officers to remove him and release Kale." But Elias did not wait for him to finish. He walked directly toward the interrogation rooms. His stride was serene, firm. No one tried to stop him. When he entered the room where Voss was attempting to interrogate Kale, the suspended officer looked up in surprise. Quickly, that surprise transformed into defiance. "Perfect," he said with a desperate smile. "Now we can get to the truth. What are you really doing in Oak Ridge Heights, Rivers? Covert operations using your family as a front?" Elias did not answer him. Instead, he looked at his son. "Are you all right?" Kale nodded. His composure remained intact even under pressure. Elias turned to Voss and placed a folder on the table. Inside were legal documents, surveillance images of the illegal raid, and military credentials that overshadowed anything Voss had managed to obtain. "Officer Voss," Elias said calmly, "you are currently holding a minor against his will. You abducted him from a school institution while impersonating a police officer. Those are federal crimes." Voss's confidence wavered. "I'm investigating a possible threat to national security." "No," Elias corrected. "You are chasing a family because your ego cannot accept being wrong, and now you have crossed lines that cannot be undone." Behind the scenes, Voss's superiors were being flooded with calls, not only from local officials and furious parents, but from high-ranking military officers, congressional offices, and intelligence agencies. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" one of the callers asked Chief Hale. "Do you have any idea what Rivers has done for this country?" Two uniformed officers entered to remove Voss. He made one last desperate attempt. "He's a ghost operative. He's running a covert mission right here in our town." The officers exchanged embarrassed glances at their former colleague's collapse. They took him out, his protests echoing down the hallway as he disappeared. Elias helped Kale to his feet, checking the marks the handcuffs had left on his wrists. "Let's go home." They walked through the station. Officers and employees stepped aside with respect. Outside, the crowd applauded when Kale emerged. Sienna pushed through to reach them, still streaming live. "Are you okay, Kale? What happened in there?" He managed a slight smile. "I'm fine, it's over." Elias placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder, guiding him toward the car. The crowd parted, expressing support and indignation. But in the eyes of those who knew how to look, the truth was visible. It was not over. Voss had been removed, but he remained a threat. Unpredictable, desperate, and now completely out of control. That night, while Voss sat in a cell awaiting charges, he made a decision. If the system would not listen, if no one believed him about Elias Rivers, then he would act on his own one last time. He needed leverage, something that would force Rivers out, that would make everyone see the truth, and he knew exactly what that leverage would be. The morning after Kale's arrest and release, Officer Harlan Voss had disappeared. His apartment was empty. His phone went straight to voicemail, and the ankle monitor that had been a condition of his release was found cut on the countertop. Chief Hale called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. "I want Voss found now, before he does something we'll all regret." But Voss had vanished. His vehicle was found abandoned at a bus station 20 miles from town. The man had disappeared using the few skills remaining from his military training. At the Rivers residence, Elias received the news with a calm that unsettled the officer who delivered it. You don't seem worried, the agent commented. Worried isn't the right word, Elias answered. Prepared is more accurate. After the officer left, Lila turned to her husband. You know he's coming for us. Elias nodded. For Cale specifically, Voss needs leverage. We should leave, Lila suggested. For the first time since everything began, her voice held fear. Just until they find him. Running isn't an option, Elias said. This ends here, one way or another. They decided Cale would not go to school that day. It was a precaution that proved prophetic. Before midday, while Cale worked at the kitchen table, a text message arrived from Sienna's number. I need to talk. Urgent. Meet me at Crowford Park Trail. Don't tell your parents. Cale read it, hesitating. Something was not right. Sienna would not ask him that. Not after everything that had happened, and definitely not tell him to hide it. He showed the message to his father. Elias read it briefly. Good instinct not to answer. It's not from Sienna. A call to Sienna's real number confirmed their suspicions. She was in class, her phone stored in her backpack. Voss, Elias concluded, already moving to secure the house. He's making his play. In minutes, Elias activated security protocols. Few civilian homes possessed. Reinforced locks, anti-shatter film on the windows, cameras activated around the entire perimeter. Stay with Mom, he instructed Cale. I need freedom of movement. What are you going to do? Cale asked, watching him check a device that looked like a specialized phone. End this, Elias answered. His voice held neither anger nor fear, only certainty. But even his meticulous planning could not anticipate everything. When Lila moved into the living room to close the curtains, a sharp sound of breaking glass filled the house, followed by the hiss of gas. Smoke grenades, Elias shouted from the back. Now! The Rivers family moved quickly toward the rear exit. But as Cale crossed the kitchen, a figure in a tactical mask burst through the side door. Don't move! Voss shouted. His voice was muffled behind the mask but unmistakable. He pressed a gun against Cale's temple while gripping him tightly by the neck. Everyone back! Elias stopped. He analyzed the situation with clarity despite the chaos. Lila remained at his side, her eyes fixed on their son. Officer Voss, Elias said in an even voice. You're about to make a mistake you can't undo. Shut up, Voss barked, tightening his grip on Cale's neck. You've played enough. It's time for the truth. The smoke grew denser, making visibility difficult. Voss began backing toward the door, dragging Cale with him. I'm taking your son somewhere else for a real conversation, he announced. No interference, no special forces backup, no calls to the Pentagon. Just us. And then everyone will know who you really are. Elias took a single step forward. Harlan, listen carefully. There are lines that aren't crossed even in war. This is one of them. Back off, Voss warned. His hand trembled slightly as he pressed the gun against Cale's head. Elias stopped, hands visible. Take me instead. I'm the one you want. No, Voss laughed bitterly. You're too dangerous. The kid comes with me. You'll get instructions soon. With that, he dragged Cale out of the house toward a waiting car. As the vehicle drove away, Elias moved with chilling efficiency. First, he made sure Lila was safe. Then he activated a small device on his wrist. Blackbird compromised, he said quietly. Alpha priority, active tracking. Lila clung to his arm. Tell me you can find him. Elias's face was grim but focused. Cale's watch has an undetectable military-grade tracker. Emergency teams are already mobilizing, he assured her. But I'm not waiting for them. Miles away, in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Voss shoved Cale into a metal chair and bound his hands with plastic zip ties. The teenager remained calm despite the fear pounding in his chest. His father's teachings echoed in his mind. In danger, observe everything. Knowledge is survival. Voss paced back and forth with the gun in his hand. He was clearly unhinged. He had removed the mask. His eyes were wild and his 3-day beard made him look even more feral. Your dad's some kind of agent, right? He demanded. Running missions here in America against his own people? Cale said nothing. He observed the warehouse. 2 exits, high windows, concrete floor, and a camera mounted on a tripod. Voss planned to record everything. Silence isn't going to help you, Voss warned, leaning in. I already know plenty. Those classified files, the Pentagon calls, the surveillance equipment in your house. Normal families don't live like that. Still, Cale did not speak. His steady gaze only enraged the former officer further. That look was the same as Elias's, unbreakable. "Talk!" Voss shouted, slamming the table. Cale finally answered. His voice was surprisingly steady. "What do you want me to say? That my father serves his country? That he protects people? That's not a secret." "Protect?" Voss scoffed. "Men like your father don't protect. They eliminate threats. They operate in the shadows. They kill." "Is that what this is about?" Cale asked quietly. "Are you afraid of my dad?" The question struck a nerve. Voss's hand tightened on the gun. "I'm not afraid. I'm revealing the truth. People deserve to know when dangerous operatives live among them." "The only dangerous one here is you," Cale replied, gaining courage. "You broke into our house. You arrested me illegally. Now you've kidnapped me at gunpoint. Who's the threat, Officer Voss?" Before he could answer, his phone vibrated. The message contained only an address, the warehouse address, and 3 words: "I'm on my way." Voss's face went pale. He ran to the windows, scanning the surroundings. Nothing. No movement, no vehicles, no signs. But Elias Rivers was already coming. "He's bluffing," Voss muttered, though his trembling hands betrayed him. "He can't have found us this fast." Cale allowed a small smile to appear on his face. "You really have no idea who my father is, do you?" Meanwhile, Elias moved through the industrial district like a ghost. He analyzed the warehouse from every angle before approaching. No support, no tactical gear. This was already personal. A father protecting his son, a line crossed that demanded a response. Inside, Voss grew increasingly erratic. He checked windows, barricaded doors, prepared for a siege that could come from any direction. His original plan, to force Elias to reveal himself as an agent, was crumbling, replaced by growing fear. "Your father thinks he's special," Voss growled. "Special forces, classified missions, but he's just a man. He bleeds like everyone else." "You're right," Elias's voice answered, resonating from everywhere and nowhere at once. The warehouse acoustics made him impossible to locate. "I'm just a man, a father, and you have my son." Voss spun in circles, aiming the gun wildly. "Show yourself." "Let Cale go, Harlan," Elias continued calmly. "You can still walk away from this without doing more harm." "Lie!" Voss shouted. "You've been waiting for this, an excuse to eliminate me. That's what men like you do, right? Silence threats." There was a moment of absolute silence. Then, from the shadows at the back of the warehouse, Elias Rivers emerged. He walked slowly toward the center, hands empty and visible at his sides. No weapons, no tactical gear, just a man in jeans and a gray t-shirt. "If I had wanted to eliminate you, Harlan," he said softly, "we wouldn't be having this conversation." Voss aimed the gun straight at Elias's chest. "Not one more step or I shoot." Elias stopped. He looked at Cale briefly, giving him a calm glance, then fixed his gaze back on Voss. "You're not going to shoot. You're a police officer, not a killer. Not yet." Voss's voice cracked. "No one knows what I am. Everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. But I know the truth. Men like you operating on American soil, using their families as cover. Is that what you think I am?" Elias asked. "A domestic operative? I've seen your files, classified missions, connections to the Pentagon." Elias took another step. "Yes, I serve my country in places most Americans will never see, against threats they will never know existed. But never against my own people. Never here." "Stop!" Voss shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Or what? You're going to shoot an unarmed man in front of his son?" "That's what you are, Harlan Voss." Elias kept advancing. "You wanted the truth? Here it is. I protect. I don't destroy. I fight tyrants, terrorists, those who prey on the innocent. That's all. No shadow government, no conspiracy. Just a soldier doing his duty." "Fight me!" Voss shouted, already desperate. "Like a man. Show who you really are." Suddenly Voss swung the gun toward Cale. But before he could aim, Elias moved with superhuman speed and precision. His hand struck Voss's wrist at the exact pressure point. The gun fell. Voss tried to strike with the other hand, but Elias deflected every attack with minimal movements, using the aggressor's own force against him. It was not a fight. It was a demonstration of absolute control. Every blow from Voss was neutralized, every attempt frustrated. Finally, with a series of precise strikes to pressure points, Elias completely disabled his opponent's body. Voss dropped to his knees. His arms hung useless, his nervous system temporarily shut down. "That's what I am," Elias said, looking at the defeated man. "Someone trained to end conflicts with the minimum force possible, to protect, not destroy." He freed Cale from the zip ties. At that moment, the warehouse doors burst open. The SWAT team stormed in, weapons raised. Behind them came Chief Hale and several federal agents in dark suits. Elias had called them before entering. He had ensured the authorities would witness the resolution. "Elias Rivers," one of the agents called. "The Pentagon sent us. Is everything all right?" Elias nodded, one arm around his son's shoulders. "Everything's fine. Officer Voss needs medical attention. Non-lethal takedown, but he'll require monitoring." Voss was secured and taken out, shouting about conspiracies and cover-ups. Cameras were already there. The story had gone public. They captured the moment Elias and Cale walked out of the warehouse, standing tall despite everything they had endured. And in that moment, the complete truth about Elias Rivers, decorated veteran, classified operative, and above all a father, began to come to light. Weeks later, what the media called the warehouse confrontation filled the Oak Ridge Heights Town Hall beyond capacity. Neighbors from every corner crowded into the room, filling the aisles. At the front, Mayor Sophia Reyes tried to maintain order as voices overlapped. The recent weeks had transformed the quiet suburb. Voss faced multiple federal charges, from kidnapping to civil rights violations. The police department was under investigation, and Elias Rivers, whose existence had once been classified, had become the center of a national conversation about race, justice, and protection. "Please, everyone," the mayor called over the murmur. "Our invited speaker has arrived." The crowd fell silent as Elias walked to the podium. He wore a simple shirt and formal pants. No uniform, no insignia, but he moved with unmistakable authority. "Thank you for coming," he began, his deep voice resonating through the room. "What happened to my family was not unique. It was simply visible. It forced a conversation many would prefer to avoid." He paused, scanning the faces in front of him. Some looked at him with support, others still with uncertainty. "I am not here to point fingers or demand retribution," Elias said. "I am here to talk about how we move forward, about how we build a community where my son, where all our children, can walk home without fear." For the next half hour, Elias spoke, not with anger, but with wisdom. He called for accountability in the police department, community oversight, training that recognized and addressed implicit bias. But he also acknowledged the complexity of the situation. The vast majority of officers served with honor. Security concerns were real. Communities faced genuine challenges. "Officer Voss failed," he said near the end, not because he suspected an unusual situation, but because he allowed that suspicion to become prejudice. And that prejudice became persecution. "We can do better. We must do better." The room erupted in applause when he finished. Even those who had arrived prepared to argue ended up nodding. He was not the vengeful operative Voss had imagined. He was a measured, reflective citizen, a man who had served his country in shadows most would never know. In the weeks that followed, change came quickly to Oak Ridge Heights. Chief Hale resigned and was replaced by a reform-minded captain from a neighboring district. New training protocols were implemented for all officers. Community oversight boards with real power to review complaints were established. Cale's life also took unexpected turns. When he returned to school, he was no longer just the kid with the mysterious father. He was someone who had faced injustice with dignity and strength. Younger students, especially boys of color, began seeking him out, asking for advice, following his example. "I don't know what to tell them," Cale admitted to his father one night. "I just did what you taught me." Elias smiled. "That's exactly what they need to hear, not grand speeches, just honest guidance. Dignity isn't taught in classrooms, son. It's passed from one generation to the next." Sienna Hale's journalism took off after the events. The video she recorded of Cale's arrest was shown in civics classes across the country. It generated discussions about civil rights, law enforcement, and community responsibility. Her detailed coverage of the events earned her a prestigious scholarship for young journalists. "I couldn't have done it without you," she told Cale one day after class. You gave me the courage to keep recording even when I was scared. I think you already had that courage, Cale answered. You just needed a reason to use it. Their friendship deepened in the months that followed, built on shared experiences and mutual respect, and perhaps something more. Meanwhile, Elias faced decisions of his own. His cover was exposed, his family's location compromised. He received multiple offers to relocate, new identities, new positions, new beginnings far from heights. He rejected them all. Instead, Elias did something that surprised everyone who thought they knew him. He opened a training center in the heart of town. Not a typical martial arts studio, but a place focused on leadership, self-defense, and community service for local youth. The Rivers Academy of Self-Defense and Leadership quickly became a gathering place for young people of every background. Elias did not only teach physical techniques, he taught mental discipline, the same that had guided his life. The waiting list grew every month. Even more surprising were those who came seeking redemption. Some neighbors who had once crossed the street when Cale passed now enrolled their children in his classes. Mrs. Callahan, who had always watched him from behind the curtains, brought cookies to the Rivers house and tearfully apologized for years of silent judgment. Change is slow, Elias told Lila as they watched it all unfold, but it comes. Harlan Voss watched these changes from a cell. Declared mentally unstable after his collapse, he was held in a secure psychiatric institution awaiting trial. His access to television was limited, but he caught fragments, and on the news, speaking at community events, working with children, being celebrated as a local hero. That image filled him with bitter impotence. In his distorted search for the truth, Voss had lost everything: his career, his freedom, his reputation. And for what? To try to expose a man who turned out to be exactly what his son had said from the beginning, a dedicated soldier who served with honor. In Oak Ridge Heights, the story continued to evolve. What began as a case of racial profiling had sparked genuine reflection across the entire community. Difficult conversations about privilege and prejudice took place in living rooms and coffee shops. Old barriers began to fall slowly but surely. 2 months after opening his academy, Elias received an unexpected visit. James Brooks, one of the elders he had met at the restaurant, arrived with a small wooden box. "I found this in my attic," he said, placing it on Elias's desk. "I thought it might be useful for your students." Inside was a 1968 newspaper, its pages yellowed but well preserved. The headline read, "Local Youth Breaks Racial Barrier at Academy." Beneath it, a photograph showed a young black man in military uniform, James's older brother, who had died in Vietnam. "The first steps are the hardest," James said, "but they make the next ones possible." Elias nodded, understanding the value of the gift. "I'll display it here to remind them that what we're doing isn't new. It's continuing work that started long before us." That night at the family dinner, Cale shared news. "Mr. Hale asked me to speak at graduation about resilience and dignity." Lila smiled with pride. "And what did you say?" "I said yes. Dad always says real strength doesn't make noise. It's knowing who you are even when no one else believes it." Elias looked at his son. He was no longer a child. He was a young man forged by extraordinary circumstances. Whatever path he chose, his future would be built on that quiet strength, the same that had sustained him in the hardest moments. As they finished dinner, Elias's secure phone vibrated with a message. He checked it discreetly and set it aside. "Everything all right?" Lila asked, recognizing that look on his face. "Just checking in on how we're doing," Elias answered calmly. "Old friends making sure we're okay." The message had been simple. "If you ever need us, we're still watching." A reminder that although this chapter might be closing, the wider world in which Elias operated continued to turn, vigilant, shadows and light, always in balance. For the Rivers family, life would never return to what it had been. Their privacy had changed. Their story was now part of the community's narrative. But with that change came an opportunity to transform a painful experience into something meaningful, to help build the world they wanted to see. As night fell over Oak Ridge Heights, Cale went outside to shoot a few baskets on the driveway hoop. The same street, the same houses, but something profound had shifted. Mrs. Callahan waved to him from her garden. Mr. Hale gave him a respectful nod as he walked by. Children called his name as they rode past on bicycles. No sideways glances, no suspicion, no curtains shifting in silence. Only neighbors finally seeing one another clearly. And beyond the quiet suburban streets, beyond the everyday concerns, Elias's military contacts continued to watch. Not because danger still existed, but because that is what family does. They watch, they wait, and they remain ready. A glimpse into a much larger world, one most people will never see or even know exists. What would you be willing to risk to protect those you love from injustice? How far would you go when the system fails your family? Elias Rivers has already given us his answer. What is yours? Subscribe for more stories that explore the shadows where courage meets consequence.